Somebody knocking at your door. Somebody knocking at your door. Oh, sinner, why don't you answer? Somebody knocking at your door. She knocked like Annetta, somebody knocking at your door. She knocked like Annetta, somebody knocking at your door. Oh, sinner, why don't you answer? Somebody knocking at your door. Welcome to day 3 of the Loophole of Retreat, Venice. Before I introduce our extraordinary Tina Camp, I would like to just share a few little short housekeeping notes. One is that the bathrooms here are being worked on, and so if you need to just walk straight across the path and through the breakfast room, there are more bathrooms there, so I just want you to know that. And also that because we are ending today at 1 o'clock, there will be food only until that time. So there's no lunch here, and that's because we want to encourage you to go across to the Giardini and the Arsenale to see the Biennale and see the American Pavilion and see the Scottish Pavilion and the British Pavilion and the French Pavilion and all of the extraordinary pavilions with Black women artists featured, as well as the Milk of Dreams. I am extremely honored to introduce Tina Camp, who is the Roger S. Berlin 52 Professor of Humanities in the Department of Art and Archaeology in the Lewis Center for the Arts at Princeton University. Camp is a Black feminist theorist of visual culture and contemporary art, and the founding convener of the Practicing Refusal Collective and the Sojourner Project. Camp has published 5 books, including A Black Gaze, Listening to Images, Image Matters, Archive Photography in the African Diaspora in Europe, and Other Germans, Black Germans and the Politics of Race, Gender, and Memory in the Third Reich. Her co-edited collection, Imagining Everyday Life, Engagements with Vernacular Photography, with Madeline Hirsch, Gil Hochberg, and Brian Wallace Stout, in 2020, received the 2020 Photography Catalog of the Year Award from Paris Photo and Aperture Foundation. Please welcome our incredible Tina Camp.
I'm going to start where I left off by saying, good morning, church family. Good morning to all of you. Like Rashida said, it is day 3. How did we make it? Let's see. As you heard yesterday, together with my friends Saidiya Hartman and Simone Leigh, I had the pleasure of organizing with them, or being part of the organization with them, of the first iteration of Loophole of Retreat at the Guggenheim. And at Simone's invitation, I've been honored to be an advisor on this second convening. And in those 2 capacities, I need to start with where I left off, actually, again. And I just wanted to share with you the directives that we gave last time around, which is that last time around what I said was, or one of the things I wrote was that Loophole sought to conjure a gathering and assembling that attends to urgent questions. How do we sustain our intellectual and creative labor? How do we figure, bear, and carry it? How do we practice freedom inside the enclosure? And how do we hold and sustain each other? How do we create a future in which it is possible to live unbounded lives? When we talked about the Loophole last time around, we said it was devoted to our intellectual collaboration, dialogue, engagement, and care. We said, we invite your participation as active interlocutors in this assembly, and our hope is that you leave it with an expanded vocabulary of shared terms that allow us to nurture and extend and transform the project of Black feminist study. It was an aspiration that we had to recognize and revalue Black women's labor and to incite a new cycle of radical and rebellious imagination and care. That was the missive last time around. And I dare say that the invitation has been taken up ferociously over the past 2 days. And I also have to share something I said this morning is what I feel like I've witnessed is what can only be defined as quantum. This passing and multiplying of energy from one speaker to the next, and the ricochet of that quantum back and forth from the stage to the audience. I need to thank all of you for the energy that you contributed to the movement of quantum over the course of the past 2 days, 3 days. And I also need to give a very, very special expression of gratitude to Rashida and to Simone. I thank you for encouraging us and for modeling to us what it means to live and think boundlessly. Thank you for refusing to accept any of the limits imposed upon Black women. And thank you for daring to imagine and pursue with confidence, absolute confidence, the project of bringing over 500 people together in Venice. In Venice. Boundless. Over 500 Black women in Venice. 700. Okay, all right. Okay, that's all. See, I wanted to curtsy, but I didn't. Okay, so again, meat of the day. This is our last day in Loophole. I know many of you do not want to leave. We'll be taking it with us. But it will commence here in the Sala something Arazzi with a performance by Cecily. That will be followed by a series of presentations and conversations. Beginning at 10:30, the Loophole performance program will resume in the Ex Piscina Gandini, and all day long, and please take advantage of it, our looped film program will continue to screen next door. And again, please do not miss the opportunity to be in that space. It is a serene and magical space where we get to partake of some of the films, but many, many more that have been screened over the course of our convening. As on the preceding days, the Sala de Capriati, which is just behind this building, serves as a lounge space, and it truly is a very magical lounge space with soft seating. And so the conference is live streamed in there. So please take advantage of that when you don't want to be in sling seats. Also, subtle and direct reminder, please silence your phones and refrain from taking flash photography here in this particular auditorium. Again, everything is being live streamed and the proceedings are being photographed and recorded. We just want to make you aware of that public announcement. I am now honored to introduce the first hour of presenters for Loophole of Retreat Venice, Day 3. And these are brief biographies. You can find the full biographies online at SimoneLeighVenice2022.org. Last but not least, I have to say with great gusto that as with the previous 2 days, the rest of the day, our participants will be introduced by the fabulous students of Spelman College who participated in the seminar Simone Leigh, Art and Theory. Okay, so to our presenters this first hour. Cecily is a Washington, D.C. hometown-based vocalist and writer. Cecily's project, Songs of Love and Freedom and Awakening Part 2, have garnered her numerous accolades. Her next project interweaves her life experiences with inspiration from All About Love by Bell Hooks and will be released in 2023. Following Cecily's performance, we will hear presentations by 3 speakers. Legacy Russell is a curator and writer based in New York. She is the executive director and chief curator of The Kitchen. Her first book is Glitch Feminism, a Manifesto. Her second book, Black Meme, is forthcoming from Verso Books. Javiela Evangelista is a public anthropologist whose research counters inequalities at the intersections of citizenship and racialization in the Caribbean and the African diaspora. Evangelista is an assistant professor of African American Studies at New York City College of Technology of CUNY, the City University of New York. Aracelis Germain is the author of 3 books of poems, most recently Black Maria. Germain is the editor of How to Carry Water, Selected Poems of Lucille Clifton. She is a member of the editorial board of the African Poetry Book Fund, and she lives in New York. Please join me in welcoming, first of all, Cecily.
I've swam in waterfalls that stung my back, and all I ever needed was to go back, 'cause even things that hurt make you feel alive, and all I ever wanted was to live before I die. 'Cause there's a river in me, and it pushes my feet in uncertain forward motion. There's an ocean in me, but it won't let me sink, and it's drawing me out, wash away myself down. I found myself searching along the shore, not ever really knowing what I'm looking for. Caught in imaginings of a different me, still insecure yet graceful and damn sure free. 'Cause there's a river in me, and it pushes my feet in uncertain forward motion. There's an ocean in me, but it won't let me sink, and it's drawing me out, wash away myself down. uncertain forward motion. There's an ocean in me, but it won't let me sink, and it's drawing me out. Wash away my self-doubt, 'cause there's a river in me, and it pushes my feet in a certain forward motion. There's an ocean in me, and it won't let me sink, 'cause it's drawing me out. Wash away my self-doubt. Please forgive my clumsy fingers. They can't hold a heart. The more I want it, the more they tremble. Insecure from the start, so I can't know you yet, 'cause I don't know myself. I can't hold yet, 'cause I can't hold myself. I can't love you yet, 'cause I don't love myself. I don't love myself the way I should. Yeah. The one before you made me into a dandelion in the wind, blown apart at the force of his words, scattered seeds of doubt. So I can't know yet, 'cause I don't know myself. I can't hold yet, 'cause I can't hold myself. I can't love you yet, 'cause I don't love myself. I don't love myself the way I should. I won't use you to make me happy, to need me, to save me. I can't ask you to make me free, to feed me. No, I can't choose you if I can't choose me too. Choose me first. To be with you, I must first be myself. Oh, I can't know yet, 'cause I don't know myself. I can't hold yet, 'cause I can't hold myself. I can't love you yet, 'cause I don't love myself. I don't love myself the way I should. If I don't know how to love, then I hurt the one I try to love. And I don't want to hurt you. If I don't know how to love, then I hurt the one I try to love. And I don't want to hurt you. Oh, if I don't know how to love, then I hurt the one I try to love. And I don't wanna hurt you. If I don't know how to love and I hurt the one I tried to love. And I don't wanna hurt you. Well, please forgive my clumsy fingers. They can't hold a hand. The more I want it, the more they tremble. Insecure from the start. Midnight humming sweetly, mystery of you near me. We've done it all before, and I can taste it once again. Your smile unwraps me. I'm comforted disarmedly. There's a softness to you, but you still won't release. I've told you all my flaws and half my mistakes, that every inch to you, and let my ego ache, all because I just wanna be beautiful. I just wanna be beautiful. Your idea of beautiful. I just wanna be beautiful. Can I be beautiful? Just wanna be beautiful every day. 2 months till I see you again. Yet still I'm willing to let you in. Been craving the depth of your voice and the spirit in your hand. Can't seem to find your flaws, ignored your mistakes, but every inch to you, let my ego ache, all because I just wanna be beautiful. I just wanna be beautiful. Your idea of beautiful. I just wanna be beautiful. Can I be beautiful? Just wanna be beautiful every day. just wanna be your beautiful. Just wanna be your beautiful. Your idea of beautiful, baby. Just wanna be your beautiful. Can I be your beautiful? I just wanna be, just wanna be, just wanna be.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Simone and Rashida for having me. Can you give a round of applause for Zachary Cutler on guitar? We have one more song for you guys. Thank you so much. All the songs that I performed for you this morning are originals. The first one is called Pisces. I want to send that one out to Sandra Jackson Dumont. I know that's her song. The next one was called Clumsy. The last one you just heard is called Your Idea of Beautiful. And this final song here is called Acceptance. And this song is about creating a safe space for those that you love. And that's exactly what Loophole of Retreat has been. So thank you once again.
Feel my ear and a spirit ready to hear. My mind is clear, no judge, no victim here. I offer you this space of forgiveness and grace. I see the suffering on your face. Find relief in my embrace. 'Cause the world may reject you, so you reject yourself too. But here, darling, is something new. Acceptance, acceptance, long overdue. If you need to cry, but laughter is fine, yeah. We'll just follow the signs. I offer you my silence. No remedies, no defense. Until you're cleansed. 'Cause the world may reject you, but you reject yourself too. But here, darling, is something new.
clap along with us. Yeah. Cause the world may reject you, but you reject yourself too. So here, darling, is something new. Acceptance, long overdue. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I feel like we can do a little better than that for the Sunday sermon. Okay, so good morning. Thank you. I need your strength. It's been a beautiful week. I'm so grateful to be here in the care and company of every Black woman and ally here in this room. We are truly folded into the loop together. Before we get started, I want to riff a little and perhaps to say some loud parts out loud. In 2012, the brilliant Rashida Bumbre organized a truly major exhibition of the brilliant Simone Leigh's work at the Kitchen in New York. As the first Black executive director and chief curator of the Kitchen as an experimental avant-garde art institution in the 50-plus years of its existence, I'm saying this loud part out loud because a first is never first. Because celebrating sisterhood, this sisterhood that has spanned years and keeps blooming, is, as Sister Madeline Hunt Ehrlich reminded us in her exchange with Christina Sharp yesterday, an example of what Black women deserve. As she reminded us, she said, Black women deserve avant-garde extravagance. Yes. So, what I've had the honor of seeing over these past days keeps instructing. What is experimental and what Black feminism instructs us towards is the imagination of abundance. Avant-garde histories, experimental histories, radical thought is made and remembered because no matter how tired we are, how much we have going on, we choose to extend our hand to one another. We choose to keep holding on. We heard from Miss Annette about the radical and avant-garde vision of the Order of the Tents. Rashida and Simone stand in that vision and legacy, a cosmic order in their own right. Their work at the Kitchen, through and beyond it, keeps manifesting and shaping the possibility of this moment right now. So, starting with thanks, Simone, Rashida, Tina, Saidia, Rebecca, Susan, and all the phenomenal organizers who have gorgeously shaped and held this space, thank you. I also want to start this day with immense gratitude and holding space for you brilliant and courageous thinkers of Morehouse and Spelman. And the other folks, yes. And the other folks of the next generation in this room, I hope you know how much we see you, how much we feel you, and how much the future is ready for you. So to keep saying the loud part out loud, to circle the mission and work of the avant-garde and the work it does to defy boundaries, as we saw with Simone and Rashida's show in 2012, the experimental and the avant-garde would not exist without the contributions of Blackness. But Blackness as a technology would not have survived without the risk-taking innovations and strategic care systems of Black feminist traditions. So I say this because as we begin, I want to call out to those who have come before us, to those who didn't make it, some of whom we know and some of whom we may never know, and to begin these thoughts that follow by holding in love and spirit all the work they did to make this now possible. Those spirits are here too today. So let's get down to it. Bringing an experimental, eco-critical analysis of the loophole forward, I want to start with some quotes. "Be not afeared. The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. The clouds, methought, would open and show riches ready to drop upon me that when I waked, I cried to dream again. I am given to understand that whiteness is the ownership of the earth forever and ever. Amen." And then, of course, water is the first thing in my imagination. All beginning in water, all ending in water. Turquoise, aquamarine, deep green, deep blue, ink blue, navy, blue-black, cerulean water. Reflecting on the thread of marronage and its relationship with the natural world, I thought it would be timely and necessary within the context of this particular forum, in a place like Venice, where we have arrived here by boat, where we are surrounded by water, where Black sub-Saharan Africans were enslaved, and where, as a result of the history of Black enslavement, there was, at one point, a presence of Black gondoliers, to talk about the idea of independent communities that escaped slavery, as being those as our womanist ancestors escaped and resisted by continuing to live, to whom we are grateful, as without them we would not be here in this room together today. As an urgent part of this, I also want to turn to a tender community so as to not forget them, the sovereign community that chose to end their lives and in doing so, their independence in an anti-life, a feminist resistance in its own right, a bending into a form of failure that strategically cracked open other understandings of what it means to generate, this root of generation, the generation of individuals who keep calling out to us in the self-determination and self-governance of their own collective rebellion. So my presentation today is for the ones who didn't make it, to call on the words of Ntozake Shange, the colored girls, those, as Shange stated in 1976, might be, quote, on the other side of the rainbow, picking up the pieces of days spent waiting for the poem to be heard. Reflecting on how to grapple with the other side of the rainbow, I wanted to meditate with this Sunday morning congregation on the work of two artists in particular, the phenomenal Nodeline Pierre, whose work you see on the screen, and Firle Baez, whose work you'll see shortly. Nodeline will be in the first sequence and Firle thereafter, and a selection of their works that are brought together today. I spent so much time looking at the work of these two brilliant Black women and have the joy and honor of being in dialogue with them over time. So I'm just going to go through some of the images. Circling back to each of them and their distinct perspectives, I wonder aloud with you today, as we draw out another thematic thread, that of magical realism, what it might mean if each of these two bodies of work became portals to the other. What if, and perhaps next slide if someone can help me. Great. What if Firle's tidal forces are showing us what a Black celestial sight looks like? A fluid version of the heavens in flux. And what if, on the other hand, we register Nodeline's vision as perhaps revealing to us a loophole into a world that could exist beneath us, a space where heaven, earth, and sea bend and collapse to create new complex passageways. These groundbreaking paintings show us tears in space and time. Firle and Naudeline, respectively, with their bodies of work, each allow us to imagine differently what a world should be and who can dream there. Today, I want to travel there and hold an equal critical position for the spiritual and the supernatural, what healing possibilities can generate at the edge of catastrophe. As Black women in a queered space, I want us to ask, perhaps, if we can agree that we have already survived the apocalypse. A version of a geologic end, as cited in the cartographic, social, cultural event, and geographic location of the Middle Passage. Are we living now in an afterlife? Can this help us be reminded of the innovations we are capable of? Can we get free? In the 1990s, Detroit-based electronic music duo James Stinson and Gerald Donald built their own mythology around an underwater Afro-diasporic sub-Atlantic civilization called Drexia. We heard a bit about this yesterday. The two performed under a moniker of the same name, engaging a fantastic feminist contra-imagination surrounding an undersea world, described by British Ghanaian writer, theorist, and filmmaker Kudwo Ashan as populated by the children of slaves who had been thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. In this science fiction, the female slaves who were thrown overboard did not die, but gave birth to children who could breathe underwater. Stinson and Donald thus made over the oceanic pathways of Mafa, visiting them not as a graveyard, but as a Black utopia, risen from the profundity of loss, elastic and agile in its creative potential. According to Ashan, quote, they used to imagine themselves in a submersible descending to the bottom of the ocean. The absolute depths, absolute silence, blackness, crushing pressure, the creaking of metal. They would think themselves into this space, and then they would start making music from this perspective of insulation and isolation. We can consider then that it was perhaps there together in this submarine of networked Black consciousness, incubated in insulation and isolation, that Drexia, the electronic music duo, first greeted the women of Drexia. Drexia in this moment became a burgeoning Black feminist collective commune, imagined and determined through the brine to haunt towards resistance as they mourned and remade the world. What Alexander Wehelier calls the shifting forms of non-human otherworldliness replacing the human as the central characteristic of Black subjectivity is represented by this tactical reinvention of diasporic journeying. It rejects a narrative of the fungibility of Black objecthood and proffers new ways to move and to mobilize. This marine future fantasy bends sky and earth, exists simultaneously in stark contrast and codependent dialogue with the practice of white captors and traders taking insurance out on the lives of enslaved people as they traveled through the Middle Passage and beyond. This perpetuated, strengthened, and advanced the framework of an economy that made chattel of human beings, thereby remaking the designation of human entirely, defined now by the oppressive constraints of a capitalist supremacy. Black people were material assets to those who transported, owned, and sold them, to be capitalized on as valued goods, assets circulated via sale in life, and assets collected on in death, the latter made literal via the practice of actively throwing underwritten, insured bodies overboard in the journey across the Atlantic with the hopes of being compensated by claims filed by white slavers thereafter. Conversely, Black people contemplating suicide on land and at sea became an Afro-pessimistic form of self-governance, rebellion, and economic sanction. As an extension to this, Black women performing infanticide, as visioned in Toni Morrison's 1987 novel Beloved, wherein protagonist Sethe kills her daughter to protect her from the violence of enslavement, dictates a multivalent approach to a radical feminist futurity. Infanticide for the Black woman within this history manifests a reproductive strike against the complex entanglement of white patriarchy and white dominion, wherein the Black womb is itself eco-critically implicated, reimagined as a geopolitical site. In its reproduction, it is weaponized against itself. The womb, therefore, is transformed into a core engine to the machine of antebellum capitalism and its systems of anti-Blackness. With nothing else left to control, the control of one's own life for a Black subject becomes a tactical emancipation. This, too, is a tender and painful contribution to the retreat of our Black feminism now. Derek Walcott, in his Sea is History, writes, quote, "Bone soldered by coral to bone, mosaics, mantled by the benediction of the shark's shadow. That was the Ark of the Covenant." Walcott reminds us that for Africans who went overboard by choice or by force, many were consumed by sharks. What this tells us is that marine life and Black life have always been, to call on the sticky terminology of Donna Haraway, companion species. As Alexis Pauline Gumbs reminds us, we are marine mammals. We are bound together by this grief. Black feminisms, womanisms, in their strategic refusal and mourning, have actually fueled ecosystems. This, too, is a complex intimacy I want us to hold space for, as it is a loophole of retreat. The hydro theory, then, of Stinson and Donald flips the script on the cataclysmic connotations of these histories, imbuing them instead with an empowered future vision. Their construction of a new myth of a Drexian race as an underwater nation and radical wombscape comprised of African women. Their children in regeneration, a resurrection, reparative afterlife that animates the dead and dying, is an Afrofuturist twist, too. This very impossibility, shaped into possible being, articulates the generative remix and transcendent technology of the oral tradition of the Black mythos and refuses the spatial necropolitic of the Middle Passage as a tectonic site. Within it, we see the embedded algorithmic coding and structural blueprint as established by the visionary work of Black feminist organizing. Drexia symbolizing what the Combahee River Collective describes as, quote, an autonomous Black women's movement. In their statement dated April 1977, the Combahee Collective observes, quote, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression. What is remarkable, then, about Drexia as a proposal is that it alchemizes entirely the troubled world as it has been built around Black women, but not for Black women. The thought work folded into the impossibility of this underwater civilization turns the system of map-making as an illustration and tool of conquering colonial coercion and control on its ear. This flip subverts alongside the false claims of landscape, so often gendered and feminized in accounts written by men for men, in a support of manifest destiny expressed via the imperialism of discovery as a vernacular of white delusion. It is a reckoning wherein we must ask here and now, are we living underwater? Is this our negotiation toward an ecstatic afterlife? The conditions of life, living, and the living for Black people are so often predicated on the legacy of enslavement. As the early ontology of Black life shaped and restructured by the supremacy of colonialism did not conceive of Black people, much less Black women, as living human beings, the radical restructure comes in our afterlife. It is a site of Black counter-enclosure, congregation, and becoming. Continuing into today, Black people are so often utilized as machines to advance a capitalist vision that in its very articulation of a successful future, renders Blackness and Black womanhood extinct. For this reason, the historical relationship between human and machine is anxious and tense, constantly collapsing in on itself as it grapples with the task of reconciliation. To follow through the narrative begun by Stinson and Donald, perhaps then, if we are aqueous cyborgs, matrilineal descendants of human beings who shape-shifted to survive in lieu of defeat and decay. It is our existing on solid land, constrained by the supremacy of the landscape itself as a gendered, race-classed, and failed locality and tradition that perhaps has created the collective condition of I can't breathe. This is embodied by the state-sanctioned social death and physical death alike. We can't breathe because existing on land rather than underwater in this futurist imagination defies the ways in which we've been re-engineered. Freedom, then, and the destruction of all systems of oppression becomes a task of remapping our bodies and the land we travel through, newly finding ways to blur and blend the logic of our earthboundedness, instructed by the ways in which Black women, royalty of Drexcia, each of you in this room, innovated to make a life at sea possible. So this is why the work of Nadine Pierre and Firley Baez reminds us perhaps to think differently about our relationship to land and sea. A restructuring of the romanticism made manifest destiny by the likes of those within a movement such as the Hudson River School, where outdoor painting or plein air becomes Black feminist labor and GIS mapping by existing in and at the highest celestial point, or submerged within the darkest depths of the sea. Our plein air is between the stars and at zero gravity. Our plein air is awash in salt water. These are the vantage points that Nadine and Firley show us. They reframe American wilderness. They give us painterly passageways and portals pushing back at a typhoon coming on. As Morgan Parker writes in her poem, Hottentot Venus, business is booming, and I am not loved the way I want to be. I am technically nothing human. I will never be a woman. The loophole of Black feminism requires us to revise human and woman, to remind ourselves that the new world for us has never been free, but that the conditions of freedom have always necessitated the ending of the world. Plunged into the womb of the water, suspended into outer space, all at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Legacy. Simone, Rashida, Tina, Saidia, Team Loophole. You are grains of rice deeply embedded in the telling patterns of our crowns. You are embroidery on a quilt, thick and warm, hanging quietly in a window, birds, crosses, signaling the way. Thank you. Yes. Yes, indeed. Whew. I would also like to thank We Are All Dominican. Visits to the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights hearings, protests at the consulate. You have saved my life and given purpose and meaning to writing. Thank you for being the holding hands on the loophole image and for breaking chains. We Are All Dominican is a group of activists fighting against statelessness in Dominican Republic. Another island, part of another island. In 2013, the Dominican Republic's Constitutional Tribunal ruling 168-13 retroactively revoked the citizenship of thousands of Dominican nationals of Haitian descent, creating the 5th largest stateless population in the world at that time, and the largest in the Western Hemisphere today. Without nationality and often without essential paperwork such as birth certificates and passports, Dominicans of Haitian descent who are stateless are habitually denied the right to vote, work, register marriage, own or inherit property, receive government health, educational benefits, or travel. The ruling simply made legal the long-standing racialized and clandestine practice of converting Haitian descendant Dominican citizens into foreigners. The ruling, as well as the laws that preceded, demonstrate how anti-Blackness and racialization are processes through which citizenship is measured and mobilized to reorder society and formalize hierarchies. Following the ruling, a New York Times article titled Forced to Flee Dominican Republic for Haiti, Migrants Land in Limbo. This article highlights the plight of Haitian migrants, but renders thousands of Dominican nationals set for deportation invisible. And there were several titles at that time that had this misconception. And this is when we had coverage of the issue. Directive, sovereignty. The Dominican government claimed that it was their sovereign right to enact this law. What is the irony of a sovereignty based in US imperialism? The Junta Central Electoral is the institution that managed the process of denationalization. And the JCE, or the Junta, was established on April 12, 1923, under US supervision as the precondition to US withdrawal from Dominican Republic in 1924, after the occupation. Ultimately, the JCE was promoted as a means to ensure democratic elections after their withdrawal and as a symbol of Dominican sovereignty to come. The Cedular card, National Identification Card, was issued in 1932 during the 31-year dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, who became a face of US empire as its reach expanded throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. So the very card at question was first issued during the dictatorship. The institution that manages the process of denationalization was established by US imperial law. I saw while at the archives in Seville how personhood under Spanish law excluded people of African descent. I saw in the archives of the UNHCR how DR enabled asylum for groups that were not of African descent, welcomed groups who were not of African descent. The irony of a sovereignty that models itself after others. Law 169-14, which was supposed to be the solution to 168-13, literally divided Dominicans into two groups in order to regularize their status, Group A and Group B. Group A consisted of Dominican-born children who already had birth certificates, national ID cards, and who were registered. I'm sharing my time, so I wanted to keep my portion short. I'm going to go for a little bit longer. These national ID cards, Group A consisted of Dominican-born children who already had birth certificates, national ID cards, and who were registered in the civil registry at some point. Group A, those who had their birth registered, could apply to have their citizenship recognized. There was no deadline for Group A applications. Law 169-14 claimed that this group would be granted their cedulas and recognized as Dominican citizens without additional administrative hurdles. with the exception of cases of fraud. Essentially, this law was a failure, and we'll have an update shortly about what's happening in Dominican Republic 9 years after the ruling and this supposed solution of Law 169-14. The gravity and urgency of forced displacement extends far beyond Dominican Republic. The year after the ruling, 59.5 million people were in a state of forced displacement globally due to persecution, conflict, generalized violence, or human rights violations. Currently, there are 89.3 million people forcibly displaced. In 2020, only 3.9 million stateless people were documented, which the UNHCR admits reflects underreporting. We appreciate Loophole for the space to plan, plot, strategize, and for modeling sovereignty, a genuine sovereignty that emerges in a space where Haiti has no stage, where Dominican Republic is not discussing this issue. We are grateful for this worldwide, underground, people's radio station, where I will transition to the directive of marronage. Seeking freedom in one's own home, a place where you belong. This describes the work of Reconocido, which means to be recognized, a group of organizers in Dominican Republic who continue to work against statelessness. I will now introduce, by way of video, Ana Maria Belique, a brick house, Dominican organizer with Reconocido, also Muñecas Negras. She studied sociology in La UAS and has a specialization in Afro-Latin American and Caribbean studies. In her section, you will find information about some of Reconocido's publications. I invite you, especially those who are watching via live stream or watching in the future, to take screenshots of the websites that she provides. Much like the Kambahi Collective, who Legacy brought up, and Ida B. Wells, we're thinking of these documents being handed off to others, as Ida B. Wells passed on her pamphlets, as the Kambahi Collective passed on their pamphlets, hand to hand. Please enjoy this section from Ana Maria Belique and continue to pass on her work hand to hand.
Nuestra población sigue afectada, sigue padeciendo los efectos del racismo institucional a través de la sentencia del Tribunal Constitucional Dominicano. Hoy en día, miles de dominicanos de ascendencia viven una situación de especie de limbo legal. El actual gobierno que tenemos en la República Dominicana no aborda el tema y no pretende buscar solución para este tema. A partir del 2021, la República Dominicana endureció su política anti-haitiana. Hoy cientos de compañeros tienen miedo de salir a la calle, a pesar de ser personas que nacieron en este país, no pueden ser víctimas de detenciones arbitrarias y de destierro. Miles de jóvenes tienen miedo de salir de su propio entorno para llegar a la ciudad, por ejemplo, ya que para nosotros no hay espacio seguro para nuestra población. En octubre, noviembre del año 2021, las autoridades de migración ejecutaron una especie de cacería en los hospitales públicos del país en contra de las mujeres migrantes embarazadas. Las sacaban de las salas de parto, las llevaban a los camiones de migración y las deportaban a la frontera con Haití. Un caso emblemático que nosotros dimos a conocer fue el caso de Natalie, quien la sacaron de la sala de parto. Ella comenzó a desangrarse y estuvo pues a punto de perder a su niño por culpa de los agentes de migración. Durante los meses de mayo-junio de este año 2021, el movimiento reconocido también ha estado denunciando cómo los agentes de migración ejecutan su política de manera arbitraria y de manera hostil en contra de nuestra población, sacándolo de los autobuses, procesándolos para deportarlos. Ustedes quizás se preguntarán, pues, ¿cómo esto se hace? Pues muy sencillo. La política migratoria de nuestro país se basa por el color de la piel. Cuanto más negro tú eres, ellos presumen que eres haitiano. Por lo tanto, no importa que tú demuestres o que no demuestres, en un primer momento el trato es como si fueras haitiano. Y si por si acaso no tienes documento de identidad, pues es mucho peor. Desde el 2007, las autoridades dominicanas han secuestrado los documentos de las personas dominicanas de ascendencia haitiana. Nos han impedido el libre acceso a nuestro registro de nacimiento, las actas de nacimiento, la cédula de identidad. Aplicaron una nueva constitución que legitima todas las prácticas arbitrarias que han estado ejecutando. Emitieron la sentencia que desnacionalizó de manera retroactiva a más de 4 generaciones de personas. A los defensores de derechos humanos, a las personas que nos apoyan, los llaman pro-haitianos, traidores a la patria, y muchas veces se han hecho incluso marcha llamando a la muerte de los traidores. No podemos circular libremente en la tierra que nos vio nacer. Y al igual que Harriet Jacob, somos libres, pero estamos encerrados y con miedo. Nuestra lucha no es únicamente a favor de los dominicanos de ascendencia haitiana. Nuestra lucha también es a favor de la posibilidad de una República Dominicana verdaderamente democrática, que respete y honre su diversidad, no fundamentada en ideas o exclusiones racistas, misóginas, homófobas o de ningún otro tipo. Nosotros invitamos a todas las personas que creen en estas posibilidades a pronunciarse, a solidarizarse para lograr la restitución de nuestra nacionalidad, de la nacionalidad de todos los dominicanos y dominicanas que hoy están afectados. Si quieres conocer más de nuestra historia y de nuestro trabajo, te invitamos a que visites la página web Nos Cambió la Vida y nuestra página web reconocí.do. Les dejo el enlace en la descripción. Allí pueden encontrar muchísima más información. Muchísimas gracias y cuento con su solidaridad.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Wow, thank you, Javiela, Legacy. I am deeply moved, as I have been every hour since I arrived. Simone Leigh, Rashida Bumbre, Tina Campt, Saidia Hartman, my profound gratitude to you. How deeply I feel the resonance of what you have dreamed and brought breath by breath into being, for what your works make it possible to think and to feed my children. I feel the flourishing and renewal of heart across my lines and time. Thank you to everyone who makes this possible. 2 epigraphs. Our children cannot dream unless they live. They cannot live unless they are nourished. And who else will feed them the real food without which their dreams will be no different from ours? Audre Lorde, from Poetry is Not a Luxury. The world has writ the letter now. writ the letter now, 'twas never wrote before. Lucille Clifton, age 10. I have marked each one of these sections 1 as like a stitch, a repetition. 1, I was making a small amulet of ancestral courage. I made it at the kitchen table beside my children. Glue, my daughter's brown pencil, a safety pin to line this eye with coal, a knife to trace or open for myself the channels between the hands and the rest. I come upon a blessing in the street. It is a sound I come upon that when I come upon it blesses me. Children at play, a clearing of sound within which I always hear the ocean. A repetition making openings in the air. It is in those openings that I find my language and move. Can we play the sound? Thank you. Children at play, a clearing of sound within which I hear the ocean, though maps say that it's miles further. 1. Umnia's letter to me says, over thousands of years, the wind sanded the mountain with its breath, but today the birds still fly the same route around where the mountain stood. I hope the wisdom of the memories you can't remember guide you. I hope you find help whenever you ask. 1. I too am built out of a question about the sky. The lights of the technician's office were dimmed as she slid the wand up inside me after, like a room, the baby emptied me in space. Space is what I thought. And in that room, my heart then had a brazen dream and drew with its brown fingers its own curtains back, so that I could see the courtyard inside it where the peacocks swept the dirt with the dark of their closed tails within which the green burned secretly like a fever. And I saw my 6 words and their ghosts and the mothers nodding from beneath the pepper tree in a well at the center of the yard of my heart. And I held the dead given pail, so lowered it down into my chest, then up, and like that was taught by the elders to lift sorrow out from my sorrow. 1. The spring of 2020, our son has just turned 5, and our daughter will soon be 3. It is a time of anguish. It has been a time of anguish. Because our children are not in school, we choose what we will tell them and how and when. The kids and I spend an afternoon boiling peony petals, then taking turns mashing them in the pilon. We wash the paper and the pigment, and the color goes from a nearly invisible violet to a purple so strong it is like medicine. It grows darker through the night, even in our sleep. They know this now, the more than you can see. Violet inside the petal, purple inside the violet, our togetherness inside the purple, and the dreaming inside of that. 1. Kamau Brathwaite. Let me tell you how one time there was a tree outside of my bedroom window which was trying to make me into a tree. Nikki Giovanni said in Winter Poem, and I stood perfectly still and was a flower. 1. For years I raced from here to there and was not still. I made decisions about my time, I sold my time. So much of my mother's time was taken, as was her mother's and her mother's. So many generations like that. But also, my mother felt compelled to make, not for money. She worked all kinds of jobs for that, but because she had a compass in her that said make. She sometimes filled the trunk of her car with palm husks and brought them home. She'd spend weeks painting a single face on a single husk. What stillness of spirit to watch her work. 1. For reasons I won't begin to get into here, I have spent the past several years wondering what would have happened had my great-grandmother lived. Had she not passed when my grandmother was so little, about 4. The oldest of my great-grandmother's 7 living children was 17, and the youngest, the twins, were about 2. I have been thinking so much about that mother tear, and also the refuge of our home now, the wellness of the children. What makes that possible? 1. One mother cannot be enough. I have one mother now, you know, but once there were more. My family, scatterings, Griffin, Georgia, Chicago, Arecibo, Beleza, Agisogdo. When I was a younger person, I knew that sometimes when I needed the others who might have loved me, all I had to do was put my body down in the sand or in the dirt. 1. The eyes. I have only seen it a few times in my life. When my youngest is just born, I sense that she is studying me, trying to see. When she thinks I am not looking, she fixes her eyes on me in such a way, and then when I face her, it changes. I am aware that the doctors say it is too early, but this feeling of her studying grows stronger as she grows. Once, when she is not yet a year, I am changing her quickly, absent-mindedly on the changing table, and for a moment right there, she turns, and there flashes her single eye. For a moment, I think, were you angry that I called you here? Hush. 1. Before all that, when I am in labor in the hospital and the first doctor, a white man, has flooded me with Pitocin as punishment, I think, because I say I want to try without Pitocin and no epidural, and he says something sarcastic, and that it has to be quick because there is meconium in the waters, and I say, okay, because I remember the last time and how close it all was, and he says it too rough when he says, pit her. And I am thinking, thank God this is not my first child. I know I can do this. And I'm also thinking about how he's trying to make me think he has the dogs on me. And he goes to lunch, and the next doctor comes in. She is Asian. I do not know from where. She says, I think she says it sternly and maybe a little in disbelief. There is no need for her to be on this much Pitocin. And they bring me down and was a flower. And then the baby, strong as a rose. Then they are wheeling us away. It is all too fast. The hospital is full, and there is a woman giving birth in the hallway. I turn back to see for a moment the haggard placenta in the hands of the nurses. They are taking our elder away. She is substantial and staggering and strange, a cloak, a stingray. I have not thanked her properly and seen her face. That's when it seems she strains to turn her body toward us, and I sense that it is the first time, and the vision burned in my ears like that. Grandmother, following our child out, though you knew the air would kill my elder, but also the baby and baby twin, her mother, her me, her meadow of wild flowers, who when I had no hands, no mind, took care of her and made her live. 1. My child of eyes sometimes runs to me in the morning to lift my shirt just above my belly button to be sure, she says, that I have one. I think of Toni Morrison's pilot, born without a navel. In the story of my mother's line, there were experiences more enormous than I could understand. On the ladder, a broken rung after a broken rung after a broken rung. 1. And always there is the memory
always there of my mother, sweeping as she wept the street. How spleed she was, my mother, weeping, as everyone came out of their homes to watch, no shield, no weapon but herself. She did not run away, not then, at least, my mother. 1. And though she was the river silt and gold, and though she was the drop of rain, and just a skinny bitty dandelion of a girl, any time they needed someone to carry the pots, to catch the knife, to walk in front, it was her they put. And though she was the shriek, and was the war and not supposed to be the flower, and was their dog and was not free, what wore her head she could not lose, and what opened her free she pressed inside, my tamarind, my mother lean, my yam astride the dark. She wrote her root into the dirt, and though, the green she was a while. Thank you.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Masati Moorhead, and I am a sophomore photography major with a minor in anthropology at Spelman College. Since March of this year, I have had the amazing opportunity to work as an intern alongside my phenomenal she heroes, Simone Leigh and Rashida Bumbray for Loophole of Retreat, Venice. These past few months have been a dream and extremely important to my growth as an artist and a thinker. Thank you, Mama Simone, Rashida, and all the organizers of this gathering, and thank you to our ancestors, everyone here holding us up today, and those of us not yet born. I am honored to briefly introduce our final distinguished speakers for Loophole of Retreat, Venice. Saidiya Hartman is the author of Scenes of Subjection, Terror, Slavery, and Self-Making in 19th Century America, as well as Lose Your Mother, A Journey Along the Atlantic Slave Route, and Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, which received the National Book Critics Circle Award and the P.N. Galbraith Award for Nonfiction. Hartman received a MacArthur Fellowship in 2019 and was nominated as a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2022. She's University Professor at Columbia University. Diane Lima is an independent curator and writer based between Sao Paulo and Salvador. A key Black feminist voice in Brazilian contemporary art, she is part of the curatorial team of the 35th Biennial de Sao Paulo that will take place in 2023. She was awarded a Ford Foundation Global Fellowship in 2021. Following these talks, we will screen Lorraine O'Grady's new film, In Progress, Greetings and Thesis, followed by a conversation between O'Grady and Simone Leigh. Lorraine O'Grady is a conceptual artist and cultural critic. While consistently addressing issues of diaspora, hybridity, and Black female subjectivity, she uses diptych to address the diverse and hierarchical either-or categories underpinning Western philosophy. Last year, a retrospective of her work was organized by the Brooklyn Museum of Art and Duke University Press, published a collection of her writings, Writing in Space, 1973 to 2019. Simone Leigh's expansive body of work in sculpture, video, and performance centers Black femme interiority. This weekend's convening Loophole of Retreat, Venice is an extension of Leigh's exhibition, Sovereignty, currently on view, across the canal at the U.S. Pavilion as part of the 59th Venice Biennale. Following their conversion, our program will close with remarks by Loophole of Retreat Venice curator Rashida Bumbray. Thank you.
I didn't expect to start this crying, but Aracelis, my God. Legacy, Javielas, the floodgates are already open. So I too want to thank Simone Leigh for making this occasion possible, and Rashida for gathering us. I have a tendency to cry, so they just pushed me into the zone. So I had planned to share some reflections on Jacob's loophole of retreat and the ways we might imagine freedom from a dismal hole. After hearing Greta Colombo's presentation yesterday on Antigone and the boat and attending and witnessing Okwe Okwakwasilie's performance about all the boats on which we have ever been seized and on which we have fled, I decided to share this excerpt about another Antigone inside the racialized enclosure. Thank you, Christina, Dion, Canisia, Ronaldo, Abdi, for listening again. Thank you, Okwe and Tina, for being partners and collaborators. And I'm sorry, I need a tissue. Okay, so I'll try to get it together. Okay. And I'm reading from my iPad, which is something I never do. So, and this is an excerpt from a piece called Litany for Grieving Sisters. She has prepared for this moment and invites us to act as witnesses, to gather with her, to have her back at the last hour, to stare down her assassins. The state wanted her to lie unwept and unburied, no mourners, no tombs, no witnesses. The ones who love her are not allowed to behold her death, to see how courageous she has been before the grenades and the sharpshooters, to listen for the laughter as she shouted, "This is but a drink of water to what I have already suffered." I'm just going to turn my back and close my nose. This toil-worn woman has learned to meet death with her back straight, no matter how afraid. She has never known herself separate from grief, grief doubled and multiplied. So many are gone, but she is still here. She takes little joy in this fact. Even meager survival is cruel. She wants to die so she can be in the company of all those she has loved, so she can stay with the child forever. She is not the last sister on earth, but this is how it feels as she makes her way through streets filled with death. There is nothing to persuade her otherwise. Grief and despair, not reason, drive her, push her forward. Time has fallen away, and the only reliable measure left is one step forward, then the next, as she cuts a blind path through the labyrinth of the city. She will search for him. Nothing will stop her. There is no one left to protect, and she remains trapped in the graveyard of the world. She would prefer to sew herself into her own shroud. She cries out, but there is no one to receive her cry or to meet her call, only the silence of the desecrated city, refusing the dead world, recoiling from the pile of corpses, she looks away from the carnage and moves ahead, trying to take in as little as she can without stumbling. Is this a dream? Is this the prophecy? Has she always known that this was to be her fate? That she would be left behind to witness the ruin of the world, to lose everyone she has ever loved and be forced to continue, to persist in their absence. She is weathered. The rounded shoulders, the abraded flesh, the turned-down mouth, the blank, glassy eyes mark her like rings on a tree, etch the damage done by successive centuries in her face and gestures, the body burden of slow death and undocumented extinctions. She is not 30, but the dead weight of the world has depleted her. She doesn't say, "I am so tired, Lord." She doesn't call to Jesus. If only she could appeal to some divinity for the sake of the child, for the fate of her brother, or strike a bargain or offer her life in exchange. But she keeps the gods out of this. Let us not mention the gods. She is not a mother, and yet she has mothered. She is sister and mother, two in one. To mother in this world is to be defeated, and the ones conscripted or willing to assume the maternal function are destined to mourn as much as to nurture. Filial love is no less bound to tragedy. Her crime will be her devotion. Care will swallow her whole, steal her last breath, crush and destroy her. Her love trespasses the law that decrees her and her kin unlovable, ungrievable. The law breaks them, and in turn, they break the law. She holds the child closer as if to prevent the infant from seeing the destroyed world, to shield the little one from the disaster that has already claimed her. It is this impossible desire, the unreasoning love of a grieving sister intent on protecting a child already shrouded, that propels her forward. She can remember a ginger cake in the shape of a heart. She can see the words scrawled in the attic and recall her mother's words. "I am shrouding my poor children." What a task for a mother. I know what grief is. I can bear more. The black morning has come. Harlem is still and quiet. She wonders if anyone else is alive, if her brother man might be alive. She knows not to wait for rescue. No one will come in search of her. It never crosses her mind that he will come looking for her. She must be the man. She has taken the place of nearly every man in her family. She must carry it all. She must shoulder the burden until she is exhausted. It is too late to save the child or the threadbare life that had been theirs. Everyone in the building and on the block is gone. Yet strangely, the buildings are untouched, indifferent and stolid, as if waiting for the new occupants, as if this destruction has been desired, as if natural disaster were the plan. This grieving sister, the one slain, the one still holding on, worn away to nothing and used up, undone by the vision of their father in a chokehold, the recurring nightmare of their sister's murder after the 911 call, the best friend gunned down on the threshold of her apartment, marooned on the bridge, trying to save her children in the storm, is not to be spared. She has lived with the knowledge that she has been condemned, and her death, like theirs, will be premature and untimely. She fears that she will never be free of the image of men struggling for the last breath, women abandoned and bereft, women left for dead in the streets, martyred girls in Sunday dresses, the boy slain with his favorite candy still clutched in his hands, the sneakers dangling from telephone lines, the red ribbons of little girls, the shattered faces of little boys, the sounds of fathers sobbing and pleading. She doubts that she will ever find her brother. Can one be a sister without kin? The perverse lines of descent, the names of fathers withheld and erased, X'd by shame and incest, absconded, captured, gone. She is no father's daughter, no mother's child, but a stranger in the house, an eternal alien. In the search for him, she makes a perilous claim, if only to ward off a permanent lovelessness that she cannot avoid or escape. To be a brother's sister, a brother's heart, a brother's savior, a brother's undoing. Is hers the labor of a mother, a sibling, a daughter, a sentinel, or a lover? If he is alive, will he blame her for what has happened, for everything they have suffered? Is it her duty to repair the ruin of the world? Blame she surely deserves because she is alive, the child is dead, all the others are gone. Isn't she responsible for the future they cannot secure? Care can't unmake the world or reverse the death sentence. Her failure is the only grand thing about her. It is outsized, monumental. After all, aren't the living obliged to answer to the dying, heed their claim? How can the world take everything and let her live? Why should she? She is not indifferent to loss or to the absence of headstones and ruins, the missing signpost in water, the toll of the weather. Isn't this her tragedy, the inability to save or protect anyone? Is the loss of brothers inescapable, or the murder of sisters in their homes, by whose hand, a hand like her own, it is foreseen and inexorable? It is the reason she can never escape or elude the charge of negligence and destruction. Is her love the trespass, one that always anticipates punishment? Too thick, too fierce, too ardent, she has been judged and her fate decided. The hush of the city is the condemnation, the censure. What might she demand? Not life, not kin, not recognition, not sovereignty. Why am I still here, she asks. Brother, where are you? Need she always fear for the one she loves? Why must she be forced to assume the loss certain to break her? How much is she required to bear? All that she can withstand. The bundle is held tight against her chest. It would hurt too much to utter a name. Child is all she can manage. Mama's baby would wreck her, and mine is foreign to the tongue. Is there a taxonomy for tenderness, for beholding? The no longer mother, the not wife, the kinless sister, the lost daughter, the not woman, the not man, the nobody, the cipher, the matrix. She is still here. She roams through the silent city with the lifeless bundle, the tiny corpse that she refuses to think of as one. Kinship exists in this precarious zone between life and death. No matter, she conducts herself as if some other arrangement might be possible, as if the child might live, as if the crisis of mere survival, replayed endlessly in anticipated loss or premature death, might be averted. Finding him, whether dead or alive, allows her to refuse what the state demands. She pledges that he will not be unwept and unburied, that love is not senseless, even if it could promise nothing or save no one. For grieving sisters, what other choice is there? For them, love is not yet exhausted. It is a web of relation without proper terms or certain outcome. It is an end of the world tale with its own promising fatality. It is a story that blossoms in the black morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Saidia. Thank you so much. I don't know what I can speak after all these words, otherwise pray, or keep alive the conversation about love. Also, I'd like to thank you, Rashida, Simone, Saidia, and Tina, for the invitation to be part of this group of the impossible. We are impossible. This is then a refugee text that tries to give a voice to its own captivity, dry, airless, throbbing, and smoking. And it is spread by the observation of Saidia Hartman when she says that black girls came before the law, but they were not protected by it. Whether I was looking for this refugee or not, I only find out by writing, as I went back and forth in sentences that seemed unsolvable to me, like the one that says, without justice, there can be no love. Or the another one that said that knew intuitively that love had already been defeated by violence. Wrapped by a list of artists, 14,000 of square meters of São Paulo Biennial. This landscape reminds me of the conversation we had together, Saidia and I, at New York University a few months ago. Moment that I also tried to write about love and violence in the midst of reflections about curatorship or on curatorship. Unlikely equation between institutionality or the institutionality of the profession versus the explosion of a reflection that derives from intimate life. The proposal was to honor the invitation to exchange with Saidia some reflections on how her practice had crossed mine. And that goes through the question of how to write a history of art without a history. And that takes place between and through language. A story without a history, with Cape Hate, and that at that moment appeared like a story that presented itself not like my heartbroken expected, but as the author says, a history that is constituted from their own place with utopia. And that ends up remind us how our loves take us in such a way that they make us perform the unimaginable, o inimaginável. I, for example, never imagined having to change secrets so that she, a former protagonist, could never enter again. É esse imaginável, inimaginável, unimaginable, therefore that overflows an episteme, wishing to recompose itself as a performance via this body and this voice, from the experience of what's told and lived. Returning to the text How by Denise Ferreira da Silva, and that the dear colleague Namaduma also highlighted yesterday, which tell us that the intellectual and creative doings of Black women are at the same time a feat, a deed, a burden, and an artifact. I began the way Hortense Spillers ends when she suggests that we rewrite our monstrosity, or monstruosidade. A way yet to find ways to say, or being implicated with what I have been calling the birth of form, or even to narrate through her who have been called the character of a writer of a history that speaks. Someone with whom I can insist on my first question about love, one asks me, what does exist outside the norm have to do with break the form itself? Since I went back in time so much, I take the opportunity to tell you how I ended today, what I started on that oceanic day. I remember to this day my scrambled visions, the exclamations that appeared between the barricades, the dogs, the children, and the excitement causing me by the way in which her thoughts arrived. It's a quote. What's repeated in the body, in the voice, is an episteme. What is repeated in the body, in the voice, is episteme. I presented a handful of feelings while quoting Brazilian writer Leida Maria Martins, to help me reflect on love as an episteme. As I write, I even tried to rescue the papers with these notes, but the papers are now all packaged, and so many boxes and removals. In this insistent search to also understand hate, I ended up finding some other words of mine that in part I don't recognize. Especially those words that in guilty, I only recognize my lack of limits without even noticing yours. Thinking about limits soon led me to resort to bell hooks' words. I was looking for the new perspectives that would tell me all about love. Comfort and discomfort had appointments with me through her words, especially the sentence that says, "Without justice, there can be no love." A famous phrase from this author that we also love, and that has as a context the relations of power in children's domestic education. In this sense, taking account that according to the author, the home, whatever it may be, is the original school of love, we can agree that the love we learn will always be nourished by the violence of the home. A violence that, being generative, demands, she also emphasized, a call for justice. However, I haven't told you yet that the conversations about love and about limits had already started with Denise Ferreira da Silva, the same summer in New York, and in previous seasons, which made me conclude that the call for justice becomes a demand sustained by the moment when violence both accomplishes and reveals the failure of justice. I'm referring to the failure of justice to carry out, for example, the principles of equality and liberty, which is what the author reminds us of. I will then locate the relationship of justice within what I can circumvent, that is, yours and my limits. And I do this already assuming that we all know that the home, as the center of the patriarchal and cis-heteronormative performance, implies an act of violence. It doesn't matter whether in your gesture of your claim or in your attempt to escape. Romantic love cannot conquer everything. Perhaps the heroic gesture of conquer everything was our failure. The heroic gesture of doing justice, doing justice with our own hands and fingers, screams, pleasures, squeeze, and hugs, took us precisely to the moment when violence both accomplished and revealed the failure of justice. As I try to formulate this passage that will come now, I get the feeling that it looks like I'm joking. But I have studied and taken this exercise seriously. Love always seems to be a game. A repetition of words of the value of your knowledge. And it's only when it reaches its end, when it becomes adult, legal, and serious, that you listen to insistent shouting. What is repeated in the body, in the voice, is an episteme. So I live in doubt if I'm knowing loving within the limits of justice, or if I'm knowing love the limits of justice. As I'm doubt of time, I will welcome the feeling that I'm profound in Denise's consideration to continue the conversation with bell hooks. Considering that impossibility of justice is what structures Black existence, considering that impossibility of justice structures love relationships between Black women and dissident bodies, could love exist? Here I arrive at the moment where, for me, claim time as an entity is claiming the future of love. Tempo, demboa, okitembo, his spiraling knowledge, is what also makes believe in the advice of my many dear friends. Also, in Denise's wisdom, when convoking our imagination, says that knowing within the limits of justice is simultaneously a knowing and a doing. It is a praxis that destabilizes what has come to be, but which does not provide a guide for what, yes, is yet to come. From the paranoid questions I did and undid until I got here, like a very anxious one that said, "What do you have left?" Or another one which insisted on saying, "But what are the bearable limits of violence in the relationship between two survivors?" Or yet another one that got stuck in the text that we threw to the wind and asked, "What words do you confuse with love?" All these questions led me to the answer that a friend and rapper in song seemed to answer for me. Rico Dalassan says, "Everything I know about love, I invented." A sound that opens me up to the possibility of imagining what love can come to be, and that refers both to what I learned in the houses I lived in, and to what, like the limits of justice, needs to be reimagined. For this possible that opens up, I end up taking with me 3 points. Returning to the reflection about knowing within the limits of justice and defining limits, not in the sense of what justice cannot, but as the line in which justice comes to be, I open the first question. If justice, when addressed in the economic and legal side, is immanently limited in limiting of the relationships between people it comprises, could you say that the search of justice to make love possible would in itself be its frontier? The case is that the love I learned in violence and from violence, from a social affective situation that was ancestrally repeated, had already taught me that love would not save us from the impossibility of justice. And today, it seems to me that out of love or fear, we wanted to provide it, or to prove it. Love or fear? That's the second question. I'm always asking and repeating, what words do you confuse? Perhaps the impossibility of justice shaped a type of love that tried to resolve itself in the very fear of injustice, injustiça, of the fear of death, morte. A class problem, a gender problem, a sexuality problem, a race problem, an environment problem, a category problem, all with the generational and generative violence. The romantic structure of relationships seems to me to have been at the basis of the very salvationist idea and the heroic idea of doing justice. The heroic gesture of doing justice with our own hands and fingers, screams, pleasure, squeezes, and hugs. And finally, my third and final question is the impossibility of dealing with our excess, the excess carried in the sexual body of the native slave woman that Denise talks about, a consequence of our direction to make love a productive regime? Has our desire just become a threat to the achievement of colonial and national juridical economic goals? Was disamour, was loveliness our punishment? I go back and forth with bell hooks talking about true love. Was this the text for true love? A reversal for true love? In this improvisation, we can simply say that we weren't ready and maybe never would be. To love what you learned to love, the way you learned to love with fear. I end with the feeling that what I know about love, I invented. That's why what that day is here with you remind me of. Acts of faith, revolt, rebellion. Thank you.
morning. Lorraine.
May I say some thanks while you?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to say thanks in a sort of different way. When I was at the last Loophole of Retreat, I commented that we had reached critical mass and that we would no longer be lonely. And actually, at this convening of Loophole of Retreat, what I said before seems like a lifetime ago, because we are no longer afraid of being lonely. We are no longer trying to connect. We are connected. We're no longer standing still, defending a position. We're going forward. This movement is unstoppable. And what makes it unstoppable, it requires thanks to many different elements. And I would like to thank first this audience whose kindness and electric energy and keen wit I have experienced every day since I've been here. And I would also like to thank the participants who have believed deeply in their own individual contributions and have brought that to this communal project. And I would also like to thank, of course, Sadia and Tina for assembling this program, which in its intelligence and its sensitivity, it's just brilliance. To me, this program has been a work of art in itself. And Rashida, I can't even imagine what you have been through to marshal everything that it took to make this event happen, every aspect of it. And I want to thank my compatriot and my friend, Simone Leigh. Simone, it has been such a privilege for these past 15 years to watch the growth of your talent and your bravery and the exercise of seemingly incompatible characteristics, your almost implacable will and your generosity. I just can't thank you enough for being the other side of this same coin.
Thank you, Lorraine. And thank you for being my mentor after the fact. I was hoping that you were there doing the work that you were doing. I was hoping that someone had written Olympia's Maid. And when I found that work, it changed my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I'm shaking. This is like weighs so much emotionally. So in the beginning of this film, there's scenes in support of Black trans women.
Yes.
Outside the museum. And they're really enthralling. I even saw a cameo of Leomi. And I wonder why you chose this context.
I had installed my show. It had been up for a few months before, and it was just the beginning of the last month when that protest march took place, and it really turned me around. It made me think, what is the relationship between this and what is going on inside the museum, what I'm doing inside the museum? Because coincidentally, each time that I had been in something or doing something at the museum, it had been somehow or the other timed with this focus that a protest group had on the Brooklyn Museum, this group called Decolonize This Place. And I had not listened to their objections carefully enough, I felt. And so it was this Black trans women's Lives Matter protest that really brought it home to me very forcefully that this was something that I had to come to grips with as an artist, as a fine artist, and as very cerebral artist. How does my work fit with what they are having to face? And so I'm still working that out, obviously, but that was why the context became so important.
And I'm really curious about this part of this work, questioning, which is called questioning. There is a point at which you question your success.
I question myself?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I always do. Every day.
Well, I've never seen, I can't remember an artist doing this so explicitly in their work. And the specific thing you said was, have I become a part of what is keeping the door closed to them?
Yes. Look, the way I constructed it was that they were ascending the stairs and not able to get inside. Mm-hmm. And that's in fact what happened. They ascended the stairs and the doors were closed, right?
Yes.
And so, and yet I'm inside. Mm. So have I become part of what is keeping the doors closed to them is, I think it's a question for all of us,
This time, Pitchy Patchy was in tow, which is a specifically Jamaican mask who presents during Carnival and is obviously derived from West African performance. Yeah. This is the first time I've seen you nod to the history of mass performance so explicitly in your work, and I was wondering if this was a critique of performance as something that was created in the West in the 60s.
Well, I think I told you about how life goes around and around in these crazy circles and you can get diverted.
Yes.
I had begun thinking about, I'd begun thinking about Carnival as a form of protest and critique, really starting in the mid-'60s when I decided to come back to the United States after living in Europe for a while. And because I thought more was happening here. But at that time I was still a writer, and I didn't really kind of know how I was going to use this idea of Carnival critique. So it was just something that was in the back of my mind. And then in the late 70s, I began what was ultimately a change from being a writer into becoming a visual artist, right? And at that point, I had in mind doing something called Indivisible Landscapes, and it was going to be 3 different landscapes. It was going to be rivers, caves, and deserts. Right, and Rivers was the woman in red, and she's trying to bring together her Caribbean and her New England roots, and then the second one was going to be caves, and that was going to be the woman in red having gone down into the cave to pull herself together, right? And she comes out of that as a figure that I would say, well, I'm not quite sure what she came out of that as, but all I know is that the third landscape was the deserts, which is, the desert is the traditional space where the mind and the body are cleansed, and that's where the saints of old and the hermits of old, the saints of Europe and the hermits of Africa all went into the desert. In order to cleanse themselves and renew themselves and find their true avocations. And so the character that emerged from the desert portion of this trilogy was going to be something I would say would be equivalent to Mademoiselle Bourgeois-Noir. And so already I had been thinking about how I was going to use the carnival critique thing in the first part of it, which was the woman in red, right? And so I already had begun to think about some character or other that was going to express this bifurcation of my background and of my personality. And so I had put in beside the woman in red's mother was wearing white, and outside of her house, I planted this green, pasteboard tree, and it had a palm tree. It had a palm tree trunk and an attempt at fir tree foliage, right? So actually, the fir palm was the first thought that I had that was dealing with this whole business of combining these backgrounds, and I always thought that. But what happened was I got diverted, and I got diverted when I entered into the art world by discovering that it was the most segregated place I'd ever been, and that everybody had sort of settled into their respective positions. I was immature myself. I was inexperienced with the world of art, and so I can't say that I made the best critique as Mademoiselle Bourgeois-Noir. But my feeling was that the attitude that we should not. We can't change this. Believe me, everybody felt it could not be changed, right?
Yes.
And what was the response of understanding that it couldn't be changed
in
was
the black
to say,
galleries.
well, we'll just do the best we can. We just make the best work we can.
Yeah.
And I felt that was not enough. I felt that it can be changed. It must be changed. And so I was calling, as Mademoiselle Bourgeois-Noir, I began to call for more radical work.
Yeah.
And so I did this trilogy. First of all, I realized that I would shout out these poems, and I couldn't keep shouting them out, right? And so, that was going nowhere, right? So I had to start going the next step. And so I did this show called The Black and White Show. So the first, and then after that, I did Art Is. So the Mademoiselle Bourgeois project was first enunciating what the problem is, as Mademoiselle Bourgeois. Then the show that she curated was announcing who the artist should be. And then the third part of it was Art Is, which was who the audience should be.
Yeah.
And
that's where you and I are aligned.
So somehow, the energy behind this diversion from who I was as a person and as an artist got diverted. My whole thing was about self-exploration and about trying to pull myself together and to find out who I was. And so what happened was that when I finally did River's First Draft in 1982, that was 2 years after Mademoiselle Bourgeois had come out. And so So this piece that is the most fundamental to who I am, the most complete expression of who I am, ended up becoming as being a prequel.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
As a side note, Fred Wilson was here yesterday.
Uh-huh.
And we were talking about your work, and I didn't realize that he was one of the lovers in River's first draft with the Lady in Red.
Yeah.
It was really amazing
Yeah.
history. You are my congenitor, you are my avatar.
Yeah.
This declaration is part of the most moving moments for me in questioning, and because it's your direct engagement with Mademoiselle, bourgeois noir. And I'm reminded that MBN is your first performance and was also staged inside a museum. And for me, this is where the ontological underpinnings of your work came into view. Like NBN, the night implores us to create a more complex Black subjectivity, whether we win or not. Lorraine, you have a long view. It's been over 40 years since the appearance of NBN, and we're now 30 years since Olympia's Maid, reclaiming Black subjectivity. What changes do you see now?
What do I think is different now, or what do I think is going to be different now? That's kind of two different questions. What do you think? We are different now. Mm-hmm. We are different. How much we can translate what we have accomplished here is something that I don't think we can know. For me personally, it was a big moment when I decided to change my language around this process, and I decided to stop using the word struggle. Because struggle implies that there is something holding you down. Mm-hmm. And I decided that this is not where we were at now. We are at a moment of being able to look straight in the eyes and fight a battle. We are in a war. But I'm under no illusions that we're necessarily going to win this war. There are a lot of different factors, and I was trained as an economist, so I know, I have a sense of what the power is that's ranged against us, and how sometimes powerless emotion and tradition and all of the things that we have to offer can be treated fairly, as long as they can ignore us.
They will.
We don't know, that's it. I mean, the question is, we can't guilt trip forever. That won't work. So the question is, how imaginative are we going to be in forming allies? Closing our nose. We have to close our noses to the aspect of some of the people that we need for allies. But that's sort of the essence of, politics. And we have to do a lot. We have to come up with a lot of new thought ourselves in order to win this battle. So, that's the future.
I think we should end there. Thank you so much, Lorraine. I love you. nice people. I'm just going to say that whenever I do thank yous, I'm reminded of Nancy Colello Mutiti, who does it the best. So we're going to keep that thought in mind and bear with us.
So our first set of thank yous go to Tina Camp and Saidia Hartman. One of my favorite aspects of this conference has been the way we've all referenced each other. And your names already became incantations throughout these days. And so we just lift them up again and say thank you so much for knowing each other, for seeing all of us and knowing who needed to be here. And it was such a great collaboration to talk over all of the incredible Black women that we knew should be here. And of course, this could go on for a year. So thank you both. Next, I must thank the incredible Loophole team. Susan Thompson.
Susan Thompson. Do you want me?
And Simone we're going to thank the Loophole team multiple times. So I will say their names: Susan Thompson, who is absolutely incredible, and who each of you got to know very well in planning this, all of the participants. Daphne Hernandez, who worked with me at Open Society Foundations and comes from the music world and handles details, rights of music at such a high level and has been so integral. Emily Mello. Where is Emily? Who made sure that each and every person's name was recorded so that you could all physically be here, and also made sure that the Spelman young women were held and had what they needed to do what they did here. Rebecca Adye. Who handles so many details in the span of 2 minutes with the grace that we all would love to have. Thank you, Rebecca, for everything.
Rebecca is responsible for my sanity and my mental health.
Greta Hardenstein, who came in to work very closely with all of the performers and the tech team, as well as her husband, Woo Jae Chung, who was incredible. They're an incredible couple and made sure that the performers were held and understood and their requests were taken seriously, so thank you.
We have much gratitude for the Boston Institute of Contemporary Art, the sponsoring institution of both the American Pavilion and also supported the Loophole of Retreat, Venice. I need to particularly thank Jill Medvedev, the director, Ava Rispini, the curator, and Kate Hurley. I thank my gallery, Matthew Marks, Jacqueline Tran, and Alex Fang. I don't even know where to begin with thanking Cecilia Amani, whose groundbreaking work is one of the reasons why we're all here.
I want to thank the Cini Foundation, where we are. Such an extraordinary organization who is so invested in what we did here. Over these 3 days, I want to thank Renata Codello, Massimo Altieri, Gloria Pasquetto, Maria Novella Benzoni, Irene Venezia, and Julie Pisu.
I want to thank A Consulting, led by the fabulous Bianca. Marcia Pavone, Sue Ellen Pavin, Beatrice Lobatelli, Malfada, Arriva, you have to forgive us with these pronunciations, Arriva Bene, Emily, Francesca, Augustino, Emanuele, and Lucille. I think many people do not realize that the Black Box performance space is actually a swimming pool. That entire space was built by Marciano Rizzo, techno director, and his team. Johnny Damazzi and the entire team from the input level, and Enrico Mazzo for the AV, Enzo, Procopio, and Alchimia team for streaming.
Emanuela Coltranai and the translators who provided translation in French and in Italian. Luca Maglione from Event 2B and all of the hosts and hostesses. The catering team who fed us all from Santi. The cleaning crew who made it immaculate and beautiful for us. From Marcus. The shuttle boats which brought us here and back. Transport lines. The rowers for Paloma McGregor's performance. Viola Gigi and Angelica Vigasa Alvana. And we must thank the incredible Cheryl Finley and the incredible students and graduates from the Simone Leigh course at Spelman College. Masati Moorhead, our wonderful intern from Spelman College. Anastasia Warren from Simone Studio, who spent this week with Annette Lane Richter.
We have to thank Nunzi Colello Mutiti, who created the visual identity of Loophole of Retreat. And we're going to also thank our supporters who funded this event. The Ford Foundation, Mellon Foundation, U2B, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Wagner Foundation, Terra Foundation, Lambent Foundation, Via Foundation, and Goldman Sachs, 1 Million Black Women.
And I want to thank Simone Leigh. I think so many things have been said about the triumph that is the pavilion that Simone built. And the reality that the world is now and forever changed by what you have made and presented here in Venice and the platform that you've created with the Loophole of Retreat. And what I always say to Simone and what I want to say to this audience is that, once it was announced that she would make this pavilion, I was like, of course, not shocked or surprised, because it's always what I expected. And it's always what I've known you would do, to move towards your vision with purpose and clarity. And we know that we can never go back to a time before what has been central for Simone is now central in the art world and the world at large. And that, Simone, you have shifted the paradigm as what is deemed intellectual labor. The transformative and no longer invisible labor of Black women throughout the global South and its diasporas that has moved the world forward for infinity in both directions. The intellectual work of manipulating natural materials, of working with fire, of working in ceramics. And what I said when we were in here in April was that every time I saw someone turn the corner and see the pavilion, I saw tears, I heard gasps, and that it was not sentimentality. That people were weepy upon their first encounter, but it was the experience of confronting one's own lineage and future at once. And so that Simone's insistence on sovereignty and authorship and self-determination has always been an insistence on collectivity. And so we are all recipients and conductors of the lineage that you make visible in everything that you do, by always naming Black women as your primary audience. And I want to also say, people have spoken about the fact that there are children here, which is really significant and important. And I heard Simone say, actually in a talk with Deborah Anzinger, that raising a Black girl in New York was much harder than making art. And, I've just witnessed this be the Loophole of Retreat, which everyone has gotten to experience. This is Simone's life. Since I've met her, there have been Black women from all over the world that would land in her apartment in Crown Heights. It was a residency. We would have dinner parties with B.C. Silva, and Deneo, and Nuncy,
And Peggy.
And Peggy Cooper K. Fritz, whose fearlessness is only matched by my friends here. And so as you continue to ascend and bring us with you, I just know that Peggy and BC are so proud. Thank you, Simone.
Thank you. I want to thank my mentors, now departed, B.C. Silva and Peggy Cooper K. Fritz. Susan, I want to thank Susan Thompson. Susan was the curator of Loophole of Retreat at the Guggenheim, and when she learned that I would be installing an exhibition in the American Pavilion, she called me and she said, "You need me." And I did. Thank you for producing the Loophole of Retreat Venice, Susan. Please come take a bow. I also need to say that the American Pavilion is not showing the work of one artist. Conspiracy, which is one of the most important works of art I've made in my life, the film, is a collaboration with Madeline Hunt Ehrlich.
Yes.
I've known Madeline for many, many years, and she supported my intellectual growth, and this film is a wonderful part of our ongoing collaboration. I need to thank Rashida Bumbre, and I had a few things to say that I think are not public knowledge. When Rashida worked at the Studio Museum as a young curator, she realized that the tap community didn't have a place to gather. She, with the Studio Museum, purchased a sprung floor and started a monthly gathering called Hoofer's House.
With Sandra.
With Sandra. When Rashida moved to the kitchen, she brought that sprung floor with her. And at the kitchen, she gave Colleen Smith, Lauren Kelly, Leslie Hewitt, and myself our first institutional solo shows. In New York. When at Open Society Foundations, Rashida organized a convening called Art in Public Space, in which there were 50 artists from 45 countries. 2 of the artists had to travel from Sudan to Nairobi to be able to get visa to join us in Morocco. 2 other artists were stateless without passports. Rashida moved the floor to its final resting place in Weeksville, which is what we now call Brooklyn. And Weeksville was originally one of the first African-American communities of formerly enslaved people. It started in the 19th century. What I'm trying to say is that Rashida will build the ground underneath your feet. She will break the ground, and she will get your visa. Thank you so much.
Thank
Where's Zenobia? Zenobia, it's time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to all our interlocutors, artists, and theorists. We feel so much love. We're so happy. We're so overjoyed. We're so blessed. I can't believe I said that. Not religious. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing so much with us. The cross-pollination was really overwhelming, and I'm sure we'll be thinking about it for a very long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Finally, I just want to thank my family for being a part of Loophole of Retreat, my friend Adrian told me that as Zahara was walking up to the boat, she was saying, "It's happening, it's happening." She works so hard. And so I just am so happy to have my daughter here as a witness. Thank you for loving her, everyone, and all the children that are here. Ivy and Georgia May and Idan, Neva. Ivy, Georgia May, Idan, Neva, all the beautiful children that are here. We love you. And I want to also thank my partner, Rashid Shabazz, who not only is a Black feminist, but also will do anything you need. And I'm just so thankful, Rashid, for you and your support of my work and my life always. My mother, who is, my origin story, a Black radical feminist who raised 4 artists together with my father, who joined the Ancestors last year, but I know he is here. My mother began her career in legal aid, defending the rights of children. And, that seriousness she brought to her parenting. She wrote lullabies for each of us, individual lullabies for each of us. And I'm just so grateful, and thank you to my sister Cecily for being amazing and singing. And her husband, Tira.
Thank you, Zenobia, for being my reason for being. And for all your support for so many years when we went through so much struggle.
I just wanted to sing one last song. It's called Goodbye, Everybody. Goodbye, everybody, goodbye, sing hallelujah, goodbye, everybody, goodbye, sing hallelujah. Have to go and you can't come with me, goodbye, sing hallelujah. Have to go, I'm sorry you can't come, goodbye, sing hallelujah.